Subscribe to Storylab. Now, let's begin this one. The North Atlantic wind cut through Carson Sanchez like a blade as he stood on the helipad, watching the supply helicopter disappear into the gray morning sky. His hands were steady. 15 years of working demolitions on offshore rigs had trained him to stay calm under pressure, but his mind was a storm. 3 weeks. His 7-year-old daughter Lily had been locked in a storage unit for 3 weeks. The satellite phone in his quarters had rung at 400 hours, dragging him from a dreamless sleep. Martha McCarthy's voice had been careful, measured, the way people speak when they're delivering news that might break you. Carson, it's Martha. I'm your neighbor on Pinewood Drive. There's been an incident. Your daughter was found at a U-Store facility on Highway 9. She's at Children's Memorial Hospital. The police are involved. It's bad, Carson. Real bad. He'd been drilling into her with questions when Duncan Shepard, his commander on the rig, appeared in his doorway. The old man had a sixth sense for trouble. He'd served 2 tours in the Gulf before moving to civilian life, and he could read people the way Carson read blast patterns. One look at Carson's face, and Duncan had made the call. Supply plane leaves in 10. You're on it. Now, 12 hours later, Carson walked through the sliding doors of Children's Memorial Hospital with salt still in his hair and diesel fuel under his nails. The fluorescent lights made everything look too clean, too bright. A nurse directed him to the 4th floor pediatric intensive care. Each step felt wrong. He should have been here, should have known, should have seen this coming. The last time he'd seen Lily was 6 months ago, a supervised visit in a beige room at the County Family Services building. Brittany Steele, his ex-wife, had made sure of that. She'd remarried, changed her name back to her maiden name, and told the judge that Carson's job made him unstable, unreliable. 6 weeks on the rig, 2 weeks off. What kind of father abandons his child for 6 weeks at a time? The judge had agreed, slashing his custody to supervised visits only. Carson had fought it, had hired lawyers he couldn't afford, had lost anyway. Room 412. He pushed open the door. Lily lay in the hospital bed, and 4 in her small arm, monitors beeping softly. She was so thin. Her cheekbones stood out sharply, her skin almost translucent. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. But those eyes, when they opened and found him, still held that spark he loved. His daughter, his little girl. Daddy, she whispered. Carson crossed the room in 2 strides and dropped to his knees beside her bed. He took her hand carefully, afraid he might hurt her. I'm here, baby. I'm here. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Tears leaked from the corners of her eyes. I knew you'd come. Conrad said you wouldn't. He said you didn't care. But I knew. Conrad. The name burned in his mouth like acid. A doctor entered, clipboard in hand. Dr. Angela Curtis, according to her badge. She looked tired, the kind of exhaustion that comes from seeing too much suffering. Mr. Sanchez? I'm glad you're here. Lily's stable now, but she was severely dehydrated and malnourished when she arrived. Another few days, and we'd be having a different conversation. How did this happen? Carson's voice was level, controlled. Where was her mother? Dr. Curtis glanced at Lily, then gestured for Carson to step outside. In a hallway, she kept her voice low. According to the police report, Ms. Steele has been traveling for work. She's a pharmaceutical sales representative. She left Lily with her boyfriend, Conrad Jacobs. Mr. Jacobs told authorities that Lily had been acting out and needed discipline. He locked her in a climate-controlled storage unit with minimal food and water. A facility manager heard crying during a routine check. Climate-controlled. Carson repeated the words slowly, tasting the rage behind them. He locked my 7-year-old daughter in a storage unit for 3 weeks and called it discipline. Mr. Jacobs has been arrested. He's currently being held on $500,000 bail on charges of child endangerment and abuse. Ms. Steele is on her way back from a conference in Phoenix. She claims she had no knowledge of his actions. Carson's jaw tightened. She left our daughter with a man who would do this. The police will want to speak with you. A Detective Lawrence Ramsey has been by twice already, and Child Protective Services will need to evaluate the situation before Lily is released. Carson looked back through the door at his daughter. She'd fallen asleep, her small chest rising and falling with each breath. Something cold and hard settled in his gut. He'd worked with explosives for 15 years. He understood patience, precision, and how to bring down structures from the inside out. How to find the weak points and apply pressure exactly where it would cause complete collapse. When can she leave the hospital? 72 hours, assuming her recovery continues smoothly. Then CPS will determine placement. She'll come home with me. Dr. Curtis hesitated. Mr. Sanchez, I understand you want that, but given the custody arrangement. The custody arrangement was based on my work schedule, keeping me away. I'm not going back to the rig. I'm staying here. He'd figure out the details later. Money, lawyers, all of it. Right now, all that mattered was Lily. And Conrad Jacobs. Detective Lawrence Ramsey found Carson in the hospital cafeteria at 2,100 hours, nursing a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. The detective was in his early 50s, with the kind of weathered face that suggested he'd seen the worst humanity had to offer and was no longer surprised by it. Mr. Sanchez, I'm Detective Ramsey. Mind if I sit? Carson gestured to the empty chair. Ramsey pulled out a small notepad. I need to ask you some questions about your daughter's living situation. When was the last time you saw Lily? 6 months ago. Supervised visit at County Family Services. And you had no contact with her after that? Brittany blocked my number. She claimed I was harassing her. The courts agreed. I could write letters, but Lily never responded. I thought. Carson stopped, swallowed hard. I thought Brittany was just keeping them from her. Did you know Conrad Jacobs? Never met him. Knew he existed. Brittany started dating him about a year ago, right before the custody hearing. Ramsey made notes. Mr. Jacobs has a record. Did you know that? Carson's hands curled into fists. No. Assault. Bar fight when he was 23. Pleaded down to disorderly conduct. Then domestic disturbance calls from 2 previous relationships. No charges filed. The system failed here, Mr. Sanchez. Ms. Steele was never informed of his history. And now my daughter paid for it. Ramsey looked up, met Carson's eyes. I have a daughter too. 17 now. If someone did this to her, I don't know what I'd do. But I need you to understand. Conrad Jacobs is going to prison. The DA is talking 10 to 15 years minimum. Justice will happen. Through the system. Carson said nothing. I'm telling you this because I see that look in your eyes. I've seen it before. And I'm telling you that whatever you're thinking, it's not worth throwing your life away. Your daughter needs her father. My daughter needed her father 3 weeks ago. Carson stood, dumped his coffee in the trash. I'll cooperate with your investigation, detective. But don't expect me to trust the system that gave Lily to Brittany in the first place. He walked back to room 412 and sat in the chair beside his daughter's bed. Through the window, the city lights spread out like a circuit board, millions of connections and intersections. Somewhere out there, Conrad Jacobs sat in a cell, probably thinking he'd get out on bail, hire a lawyer, work the system. He had no idea what was coming. Carson pulled out his phone and started making calls. First to Duncan Shepard, formally resigning from the rig. Then to his landlord, reactivating the lease on his small house on Pinewood Drive. Then to an old friend from the Marines, Rico Dixon, who now ran a private investigation firm. Rico, it's Carson. I need your help. Name it, brother. Everything you can find on Conrad Jacobs. Employment, finances, associates, habits, weaknesses. Every goddamn detail. There was a pause. You sure about this? Carson watched his daughter sleep, saw the 4 drip, feeding fluids back into her tiny body. They locked her in a box in the dark for 3 weeks, Rico. They starved her, scared her, made her think I'd abandoned her. I'll have everything in 48 hours. Carson ended the call and leaned back in the chair. The rage was still there, burning steady in his chest, but now it had purpose. Direction. He'd spent 15 years learning how to take things apart piece by piece, understanding the architecture of destruction. Conrad Jacobs had built his life on violence and intimidation, and Brittany had built hers on manipulation and lies. Carson was going to tear it all down, but first, he had to get his daughter home. 72 hours later, Lily was medically cleared to leave the hospital. Carson had spent those days by her bedside, reading to her, talking to her, letting her remember what it felt like to be safe. The nightmares came every night. She'd wake screaming, calling for him, but each time he was there. each time he held her until she fell back asleep. The CPS evaluation came on the third day. Paige Coffey, a caseworker in her mid-30s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude, spent 2 hours reviewing Carson's situation. His employment history, his service record, the previous custody arrangement. She interviewed him, interviewed Lily, interviewed Martha McCarthy, who vouched for Carson's character and offered to help however she could. Finally, Paige sat across from Carson in the hospital consultation room. Mr. Sanchez, I'm going to be straight with you. The previous custody order was based primarily on your work schedule and Ms. Steele's claims about instability. But you've demonstrated remarkable stability in the past 72 hours. You've secured housing, resigned from the rig, and shown clear dedication to your daughter's well-being. And given that Ms. Steele left Lily with someone who nearly killed her. She paused. I'm recommending immediate temporary custody to you, with a full review in 30 days. Carson felt something in his chest loosen. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is temporary. You'll need to demonstrate stable employment, consistent housing, and proper care. Ms. Steele will have the opportunity to contest this, and Mr. Jacobs' trial will be difficult for Lily. She'll need therapy, support, structure. She'll have it. Paige slid a folder across the table. These are resources. Therapists who specialize in childhood trauma. Support groups for parents. Financial assistance programs. Use them. That afternoon, Carson carried Lily out of the hospital and into the cool November air. She clutched his neck so tightly he could barely breathe, but he didn't care. His truck, a 15-year-old Ford F-150 that had sat in a storage facility while he was on the rig, started on the third try. The house on Pinewood Drive was exactly as he'd left it 6 months ago, plus a thick layer of dust. Martha McCarthy had been watering the single plant on the porch and collecting his mail. She came over as Carson carried Lily inside, tears in her eyes. Oh, sweet girl, Martha said, touching Lily's hair gently. You're home now. You're safe. Lily nodded against Carson's shoulder. Martha turned to Carson. I made a casserole. It's in your fridge. And if you need anything at all, I'm right next door. Thank you, Martha, for calling me, for being there. That's what neighbors do. She paused. I saw Brittany once about 3 months ago. She and Conrad were loading suitcases into his car. Fancy luggage. I asked her where Lily was, and she said at a friend's house for a sleepover. I thought it was strange, but her voice broke. I should have checked. This isn't your fault. After Martha left, Carson set Lily up in her room, still painted the pale yellow she'd picked out when she was 4, and helped her settle into bed. She was exhausted, running on empty after 3 days in the hospital and 3 weeks in hell before that. Daddy, she said as he tucked the blankets around her. Yeah, baby. Are you really staying? You're not going back to the ocean. Carson crouched beside her bed, took her small hand in his. I'm really staying. I'm not going anywhere. I promise. Conrad said you didn't want me. He said that's why you were gone. He said Mom told him you were happy to be away. Rage flared, hot and bright. Carson tamped it down. That's not true. I wanted to be with you every single day. I fought to be with you. And I'm never leaving you again. Do I have to see him? Conrad, not if you don't want to. I don't. He's scary, Daddy. Even before the storage place. He'd get mad at little things. He broke plates. He yelled at Mom. She'd cry and say she was sorry, and then he'd be nice again. But I was always scared. Carson's jaw clenched. You don't have to be scared anymore. After Lily fell asleep, Carson went to the kitchen and opened his laptop. Rico's email was waiting for him, marked urgent. Carson poured himself a whiskey and started reading. Conrad Jacobs, age 36. High school dropout. Worked as a collections agent for a payday loan company called Quick Cash Solutions. No college, no military service, no specialized skills beyond intimidation. Made decent money squeezing people who couldn't pay their debts. 2 previous domestic disturbance calls. One from Eve Gonzalez, who dated him for 8 months before leaving the state. Another from Sandra O'Donnell, who'd taken out a restraining order that expired after 2 years. Both women had declined to press charges. Current residents. An apartment in the Riverside district, rent $1,800 a month. Drove a leased BMW 5 Series. carried credit card debt of roughly $40,000, liked to gamble at the Rivers Casino on weekends, frequented a gym called Iron Temple and a bar called the Brass Monkey. The report included photos. Conrad was 6'2", heavily muscled, with a shaved head and a goatee. His social media showed him posing with cars, bottles of expensive liquor, and Brittany. Always Brittany, his arm around her, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. Rico had flagged something else. Conrad's bail hearing was scheduled for tomorrow morning. Quick Cash Solutions was putting up the collateral. His boss, a guy named Gil Caldwell, apparently believed in standing by his employees. Carson read through the report twice, memorizing details, looking for patterns. Conrad was a bully who'd learned to use the system to protect himself. He knew how to charm when necessary, intimidate when possible, and hurt people in ways that were hard to prove. But he'd made a mistake with Lily. He'd left evidence. He'd created witnesses. He'd shown everyone exactly who he was. Carson closed the laptop and looked out the kitchen window at the quiet street. In 48 hours, Conrad Jacobs might walk out of jail on bail. He'd hire a lawyer, start building a defense. Maybe he'd claim Lily was lying or exaggerating, or that it was a misunderstanding. Maybe he'd blame Brittany, say she knew, say she told him to do it. Maybe he'd get 10 years. Maybe he'd get 5. Maybe he'd serve 3 and get out on good behavior. Carson couldn't let that happen. He pulled out his phone and started making a list. Names, places, connections. Everyone who'd enabled Conrad. Everyone who'd looked the other way. Everyone who'd let this monster near his daughter. By the time he finished, the whiskey was gone and dawn was breaking over Pinewood Drive. Carson checked on Lily one more time, still sleeping peacefully, finally safe, and then went to the garage. He hadn't touched his tools in 6 months, but they were right where he'd left them. Precision instruments, planning materials, everything he needed. He'd spent 15 years learning patience, learning how to wait for the perfect moment, the exact right pressure point, the precise sequence that would bring everything down. Conrad Jacobs thought he was safe behind bars and bail bonds and lawyers. He had no idea that the structure of his entire life was about to collapse. And Carson was going to make sure everyone watched it happen. The bail hearing for Conrad Jacobs took place at 1,000 hours in courtroom 4B of the County Criminal Court building. Carson sat in the back row, baseball cap pulled low, watching everything. The courtroom smelled like old wood and broken promises. Conrad entered in an orange jumpsuit, wrists cuffed, flanked by 2 bailiffs. He looked smaller than in his photos, diminished by circumstance. But Carson could see it in his eyes, the arrogance, the certainty that this was all temporary, that he'd walk out, go back to his life, maybe even get Brittany to take him back once the dust settled. His lawyer was Zachary Dunn, a defense attorney known for getting abusers off on technicalities. Expensive suit, practiced smile, the kind of man who could make black look white if you paid him enough. He approached the bench with confidence. "Your Honor, my client has no prior felony convictions, strong ties to the community through his employment, and poses no flight risk. The alleged incident, while unfortunate, has been mischaracterized. Mr. Jacobs was attempting to discipline a child who was out of control in her mother's absence. The situation escalated beyond his intentions. He deeply regrets." Judge Marion Foster cut him off. She was in her 60s, silver-haired, with the kind of sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Counsel, your client locked a 7-year-old child in a storage unit for 21 days with minimal food and water. She was found severely dehydrated and malnourished. This isn't a mischaracterization. This is child torture. Your Honor," Mr. Jacobs maintains that Ms. Lily Sanchez had access to adequate supplies and that the duration was far shorter than reported. "We believe evidence will show." Bail is set at $750,000, cash or bond. Next case. Zachary Dunn didn't flinch. "Your Honor, my client's employer has agreed to post bond. We're prepared to make arrangements immediately." Carson's hands tightened on the wooden bench. Of course they were. Conrad had connections, resources, people willing to vouch for him. Quick Cash Solutions wasn't just a payday loan company. Rico's report had flagged that they operated in a gray area, charging interest rates that bordered on predatory, using collection methods that skirted legality. Conrad fit right in. The judge looked unimpressed. Mr. Jacobs will surrender his passport, wear an ankle monitor, and is forbidden from contact with the victim or any member of the victim's family. Court is adjourned. As Conrad was let out, his eyes scanned the courtroom. For just a moment, they locked on Carson. Recognition flickered. He'd seen photos of Lily's father, probably shown to him by Brittany, and something else crossed his face. Calculation. Then he was gone, back through the door to processing. Carson waited until the courtroom cleared, then followed Zachary Dunn into the hallway. The lawyer was on his phone, probably already working on the bond paperwork. Mr. Dunn. The lawyer turned, sized Carson up in one glance. I'm not speaking to press. I'm not press. I'm Lily Sanchez's father. Dunn's expression went carefully neutral. Mr. Sanchez, I'm sorry for what your daughter went through, but you should know that any contact between us is. I just want to understand something, Carson said evenly. How do you sleep at night defending someone who tortured a child? Everyone deserves representation. That's the foundation of our justice system. Even monsters, even people accused of monstrous acts. If you'll excuse me, he's going to walk, isn't he? You'll get him a plea deal, maybe a few years, and he'll be out before Lily finishes middle school. Dunn's jaw tightened. The system works, Mr. Sanchez. I suggest you trust it and focus on your daughter's recovery. He walked away, shoes clicking on the marble floor. Carson stood there for a long moment, feeling the weight of it. The system, the process, the endless grinding machinery of justice that moved slowly, if it moved at all. Detective Ramsey wanted him to trust it. Paige Coffey wanted him to focus on Lily and let the law handle Conrad. But the law had given Lily to Brittany in the first place. The law had let Conrad walk free after 2 domestic disturbance calls. The law was about to let him post bail and go home. Carson pulled out his phone and called Rico. The employer's posting his bail. Quick Cash Solutions. I need everything on them, especially the owner, Gil Caldwell. And I need it fast. On it. Carson, I'm also looking into Brittany. You want me to keep digging? Yeah, everything. Where she's been, who she's been with, how much she knew. You think she knew Conrad was abusing Lily? Carson thought about what Lily had said. The broken plates, the yelling, the apologies. I think she saw what she wanted to see and ignored the rest. Either way, she left our daughter with him. He ended the call and walked out of the courthouse into the cold November air. Across the street was a coffee shop called the Daily Grind. Carson went in, ordered black coffee, and sat by the window where he could watch the courthouse entrance. 2 hours later, Conrad walked out a free man. No jumpsuit now. Someone had brought him clothes. Jeans, a black leather jacket, boots. The ankle monitor was hidden under his pant leg. He stood on the steps, breathing deep, looking like he just won something. Zachary Dunn appeared beside him, shook his hand, said something Carson couldn't hear. Conrad nodded, smiled. Then a BMW pulled up, not his leased one, but similar, and a man got out. Big guy, mid-40s, expensive suit. Had to be Gil Caldwell from Quick Cash Solutions. They talked for a few minutes, Caldwell's hand on Conrad's shoulder in a gesture that looked supportive, almost fraternal. Then they got in the BMW and drove away. Carson memorized the license plate, texted it to Rico, and finished his coffee. The rage was still there, banked but burning steady. Conrad was free, walking around, breathing fresh air, probably already planning how to spin this, how to rebuild. But freedom was an illusion. Conrad just didn't know it yet. Carson paid his tab and headed back to Pinewood Drive. Lily was staying with Martha for a few hours while he handled court business, and he needed to pick her up. Needed to be the father she deserved. Needed to show her that being home meant being safe. But at night, after Lily was asleep, Carson would work. He'd build his plan piece by piece, the way he'd built controlled demolitions on the rig. Find the load-bearing structures in Conrad's life. Apply pressure. Wait for the collapse. And unlike the law, Carson wouldn't settle for a plea deal. He'd settle for nothing less than complete destruction. Over the next 2 weeks, Carson fell into a routine. Mornings with Lily, making breakfast, walking her to the bus stop for the first time in months, being there when she came home. She was settling in slowly, the nightmares less frequent, her appetite returning. They'd started seeing Dr. Sheena Maxwell, a trauma therapist who specialized in children. Twice a week, Lily would talk about what happened, and Carson would sit in the waiting room, hands clenched, listening to his daughter describe the darkness and the hunger and the fear. In the afternoons, while Lily did homework or played in the yard under Martha's watchful eye, Carson worked. He'd set up a small office in the spare bedroom, covering one wall with photos, documents, and notes. A map of Conrad's life, ready to be dismantled. Rico's intelligence was thorough. Quick Cash Solutions operated 12 locations across the Tri-County area, specializing in payday loans with interest rates that averaged 400% APR. Technically legal, practically predatory. They targeted low-income neighborhoods, military bases, anyone desperate enough to take money now and worry about consequences later. Gil Caldwell owned the company outright. Self-made man, according to his bio. Started with one storefront 20 years ago and built an empire on other people's desperation. Worth an estimated $12 million. He had political connections, donated to campaigns, sat on charity boards, maintained a veneer of respectability. Conrad was his top collections agent. The guy who handled the difficult cases, the people who'd stopped paying, stopped answering calls. Conrad would show up at their homes, their jobs, anywhere he could find them. He'd threaten, intimidate, occasionally cross lines. But he was good at it, and Gil valued results over methods. They'd known each other for 8 years. Conrad had started as a repo man for one of Gil's side businesses and worked his way up. Gil had posted the $750,000 bail without hesitation, called it an investment in a loyal employee. Carson studied their relationship, looking for weaknesses. Gil was careful, kept his hands clean, let guys like Conrad do the dirty work. But every structure had a weak point. Every system had a failure mode. On Thursday night, while Lily slept upstairs, Carson got a call from Rico. "I've got something. About Brittany. Talk to me." She's been working for Morrison Pharmaceuticals for 6 years, sales rep for the Southeast Territory. Makes decent money, travels constantly. But here's the thing. She's been filing expense reports that don't add up. Hotels that don't exist. Dinners for clients who weren't in town. Little things, but they add up to maybe 20 grand over the past 2 years. Carson leaned back in his chair. She's been skimming. Looks like it. And there's more. 3 months ago, she took out a personal loan. $30,000 from Quick Cash Solutions. Guess who processed it? Conrad. That's how they met. She came in desperate, maxed out on credit cards, behind on bills. He gave her the loan, probably at one of those insane interest rates. Then he started calling her, checking in, offering to help. Classic predator behavior. He saw vulnerability and exploited it. Carson's stomach turned. So Brittany was trapped, financially and emotionally. And once Conrad moved in with her, the expenses stopped making sense. She'd report being in Atlanta while social media showed them at the casino. She claimed client dinners on nights when she was photographed at the Brass Monkey. My guess? She was using company money to keep Conrad happy, keep up appearances, maybe pay down that loan. Does her company know? Not yet. But if someone were to send them a detailed report with evidence. Rico paused. "You want to burn her too?" Carson looked at the photo of Lily on his desk. 7 years old, smiling at the camera before any of this happened. Before Brittany chose a man over her own daughter. Before Conrad's violence. Before the storage unit. "Yeah," Carson said quietly. "I want to burn her too. I'll compile everything and send it over. What's your play with Conrad?" "I'm still working on it. But I need one more thing from you. Can you get me inside the Brass Monkey? I want to see Conrad in his natural habitat. I know the owner. I'll set it up." The next night, Carson walked into the Brass Monkey wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, looking like any other working-class guy grabbing a drink after a long week. The bar was exactly what he expected. Dim lights, classic rock on the jukebox, pool tables in the back. A place where men went to prove something. Rico had arranged for Carson to meet Austin Ewing, the owner. Austin was in his 50s, former boxer, with cauliflower ears and scarred knuckles. He greeted Carson with a firm handshake and a knowing look. "Rico says you're a friend. That's good enough for me. I appreciate it. That guy you're asking about, Conrad, he's been coming here for 3 years. Regular as clockwork. Fridays and Saturdays, usually after 10. Drinks bourbon, plays pool for money, hits on anything in skirt. Used to come alone, then started bringing his girlfriend. Brittany, yeah, pretty girl. Quiet. Always looked nervous. Like she was waiting for him to explode. I saw him grab her arm once, squeeze hard enough to leave marks. I told him to take it outside. He smiled and said it was all good, just a misunderstanding. But I saw her face. Why didn't you ban him? Austin sighed. I should have. But guys like Conrad, they know how to walk the line. Never quite enough to call the cops. Never quite enough to justify action. And the truth is, I got a business to run. He spends money, brings in other guys from that loan company. I'm not proud of it, but that's the reality. Carson nodded slowly. He here tonight? Usually rolls in around 11. Carson ordered a beer and took a seat at the bar where he could watch the door. The place filled up as the night wore on. Construction workers, warehouse guys, office drones looking to blow off steam. The music got louder, voices rising to compete. At 11:15, Conrad walked in. He moved through the crowd like he owned the place, nodding at people, slapping backs, projecting confidence. He was wearing the same leather jacket, tight enough to show his gym-built physique. The ankle monitor was hidden, but Carson knew it was there. A leash that Conrad barely felt. Conrad ordered bourbon, top shelf, and headed to the pool tables. Within minutes, he had a game going, money on the table. Carson watched him play, watched how he positioned himself, how he talked to opponents, how he used his size to intimidate. This was where Conrad was comfortable, where he could be the biggest, strongest, most dangerous thing in the room. Carson nursed his beer and waited. Around midnight, Conrad won his third game, pocketed $200, and headed to the bar for a refill. He ended up 3 seats away from Carson, close enough to hear his conversation with the bartender. Another bourbon, and set up the next guy at the table. I'm feeling generous tonight. The bartender smirked. Big win, something like that. Life's been treating me right. Carson's hands tightened on his beer bottle. Life's been treating me right. 3 weeks after nearly killing a child, Conrad felt generous. He turned slightly, catching Conrad's eye. No recognition. Just 2 strangers at a bar. Hell of a game, Carson said casually. Conrad grinned. You play? Used to. Been a while. Want to try your luck? I'll go easy on you. Carson shook his head. Not tonight. Just here to drink. Fair enough. Conrad raised his glass in a mock toast. To Friday nights and freedom. Carson lifted his beer, clinked it against Conrad's glass. To freedom. They drank. Conrad didn't know he was toasting with the father of the girl he'd tortured. Didn't know that every word he spoke, every gesture he made, was being cataloged and assessed. Didn't know that the man beside him was learning exactly how to hurt him. Carson finished his beer, paid his tab, and left. Outside, the cold November air cleared his head. He'd seen what he needed to see. Conrad wasn't scared, wasn't remorseful. He was celebrating. That ended now. Carson pulled out his phone and called Rico. I need to talk to the women. Eve Gonzalez and Sandra O'Donnell. The ones who called in domestic disturbances. Can you track them down? I've got addresses. Eve's in North Carolina now. Sandra's local, over in Westfield. Set up a meeting with Sandra. I need to hear her story. 3 days later, Carson sat across from Sandra O'Donnell in a coffee shop in Westfield. She was 32, worked as a paralegal, had kind eyes and nervous hands. She'd agreed to meet after Rico explained that Carson's daughter had been hurt by the same man who'd hurt her. I dated Conrad for 14 months, Sandra said, stirring her coffee without drinking it. At first, he was amazing, charming, attentive, made me feel special. Then little things started changing. He'd get jealous if I talked to other men. He'd accuse me of cheating when I worked late. He'd check my phone, my emails, my social media. It escalated slowly enough that I didn't see it happening. What made you call the police? Sandra's jaw tightened. He pushed me. We were arguing about something stupid. I'd gone to lunch with a coworker, a guy from the office, completely innocent. Conrad came home drunk and started screaming. When I tried to leave, he grabbed my arm and shoved me into the wall, hard enough to put a hole in the drywall. I was terrified. I called 911, but you didn't press charges. He cried, apologized, said he'd been drinking, that work stress was getting to him, that he'd never do it again. He begged me not to ruin his life over one mistake. She looked down at her hands. I believed him, or I wanted to. So I told the cops it was an accident, that I tripped. They didn't believe me, but without my cooperation, they couldn't do anything. What happened after that? He got worse. More controlling, more volatile. He'd break things, dishes, my phone, once a picture frame my mother gave me. Always when he was angry, always followed by apologies. I finally left when he locked me out of our apartment during an argument. I was standing in the hallway in my pajamas at 2 in the morning, and I realized I couldn't live like that anymore. Carson listened, his rage building with every word. This was Conrad's pattern. Find vulnerable women, charm them, isolate them, control them, hurt them. And every time, he got away with it because his victims were too scared or too broken to fight back. I'm sorry that happened to you, Carson said. And I'm sorry my daughter became his next victim. Sandra's eyes filled with tears. When I heard what he did to her on the news, I felt sick. I should have pressed charges. I should have stopped him when I had the chance. Maybe if I had, your daughter would be okay. This isn't your fault. Conrad made his choices. But I need your help now. Would you be willing to testify about what he did to you? Give a statement to the DA? Will it help convict him? It'll show pattern of behavior. Escalation. It'll make it harder for his lawyer to claim this was an isolated incident. Sandra nodded slowly. Then yes, I'll do it. For your daughter. And for whoever comes after her if we don't stop him now. Carson thanked her, got her contact information, and passed it to Detective Ramsey. The detective was skeptical. Pattern evidence was tricky, especially without charges, but he agreed to reach out. That night, after Lily went to bed, Carson added Sandra's story to his wall. Another piece of the puzzle. Another layer of evidence showing exactly who Conrad was. But evidence wasn't enough. The system was too slow, too forgiving. Conrad would get his day in court, his chance to defend himself, his opportunity to manipulate and minimize. He might get 10 years. He might get 5. He might serve 3 and walk free while Lily was still a child. Carson couldn't accept that. He looked at his notes on Quick Cash Solutions, on Gil Caldwell, on the network of people who'd enabled Conrad. An idea was forming, dangerous and precise. A way to hurt Conrad in ways the law never could. A way to make him feel what Lily felt. Trapped, alone, scared, and running out of time. Carson started making calls. The plan came together over the next 10 days, piece by piece, like assembling a bomb. Carson had learned patience on the oil rig. Sometimes you spent weeks preparing for a single controlled explosion, and he applied that same discipline now. First, he needed leverage on Gil Caldwell. The man was careful, insulated by lawyers and legitimate business structures. But Rico had found something interesting. Quick Cash Solutions was being investigated by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau for predatory lending practices. The investigation was quiet, preliminary, but if someone were to provide additional evidence of illegal collection methods. Carson reached out to 3 former customers of Quick Cash Solutions, people Conrad had personally harassed and threatened. Their stories were consistent. Loans they couldn't repay, interest that compounded weekly, visits to their homes and workplaces, threats veiled just carefully enough to avoid prosecution. One woman, Caitlin Weiss, described Conrad showing up at her daughter's school, standing outside the fence, watching. She'd paid $800 immediately, terrified of what he might do. Carson compiled their statements, added documentation Rico had obtained through less than legal means, and created a detailed report. He didn't send it to the CFPB yet. That would come later, when the timing was right. Second, he needed to isolate Conrad. The ankle monitor meant Conrad couldn't leave his apartment except for work, legal appointments, and pre-approved locations. But the monitoring company was a third-party contractor, and Rico knew someone who worked there. For the right price, they could provide real-time location data. Carson paid $5,000, money he'd saved for Lily's college fund, and got access to Conrad's movements. He learned Conrad's routine, work from 9 to 5, gym 3 times a week, the Brass Monkey on Friday nights, grocery store on Sundays. A predictable pattern. Exploitable. Third, He needed to turn Conrad's allies against him. Zachary Dunn, the lawyer, was motivated by money and reputation. Gil Caldwell was motivated by profit and legal exposure. Brittany was motivated by fear and self-preservation. Each had a pressure point. On the 20th day after Lily came home, Carson put the first phase into motion. He sent the report on quick cash solutions to the CFPB anonymously, along with a note. Conrad Jacobs is currently under criminal indictment for child torture. His employer, Gil Caldwell, posted his bail. Perhaps you should investigate whether this is standard practice for an organization already under scrutiny for illegal activities. The next day, 2 federal agents showed up at Gil Caldwell's office. Carson heard about it through Rico, who heard about it from a contact in the federal building. The agent spent 4 hours interviewing Gil, reviewing files, seizing documents. They asked pointed questions about Conrad Jacobs, about collection methods, about the decision to post bail for an employee facing felony charges. Gil's lawyers shut it down, but the damage was done. The investigation was now public, and reporters started digging. Quick Cash Solutions stock, privately held but tracked on secondary markets, dropped 12%. That evening, Gil called Conrad. Carson didn't hear the conversation, but he saw the result. Conrad showed up at Quick Cash Solutions headquarters, spent 90 minutes in Gil's office, and left looking shaken. Rico's contact at the monitoring company reported that Conrad went straight to the Brass Monkey and drank until closing. Alone. Phase 1 complete. Phase 2 targeted Zachary Dunn. Carson had Rico dig into the lawyer's recent cases and found something beautiful. 3 months ago, Dunn had defended a man named Arlen Cherry on domestic violence charges. Dunn had gotten him acquitted on a technicality. 2 weeks later, Cherry had murdered his girlfriend, Ellen Paul, and then killed himself. The story had made local news briefly, but no one had connected it to Dunn. Carson made sure they did. He sent an anonymous tip to Victoria Manning, an investigative journalist who specialized in legal ethics, along with case files showing Dunn's pattern of defending abusers. Manning ran a story titled, "The Lawyer Who Defends Monsters 3 Days Later." It detailed Cherry's case, Conrad's case, and 5 others. It questioned Dunn's ethics, his methods, his apparent willingness to put dangerous people back on the street. The Bar Association opened an inquiry. Dunn's other clients started calling, worried about their representation. And Carson watched Conrad's support system crack. But the biggest move was save for Brittany. Carson had waited, watching her from distance. She'd returned from Phoenix immediately after Lily was found, but CPS had barred her from contact pending investigation. She'd tried calling Carson twice. He'd ignored both calls and had written a letter that he'd burned without reading. Now she was living in a hotel, suspended from her job at Morrison Pharmaceuticals while they investigated Rico's report about her expense fraud. She was facing embezzlement charges, potential criminal prosecution, and the loss of everything she'd built. On a Tuesday evening, Carson called her. "Hello." Her voice was brittle, exhausted. "It's Carson." Silence. Then, "I've been trying to reach you. I need to explain. You left our daughter with a monster." "There's nothing to explain. I didn't know." "Carson, I swear I didn't know he'd do that. I thought. He seemed stable, responsible. I needed someone to watch her while I traveled, and he offered, and I thought. You thought wrong. And Lily paid for it." Brittany's voice broke. "I know. God, I know. I've been living with this every day. I made a mistake. A horrible mistake. But I'm her mother. I love her. I need to see her. You won't. Not now. Maybe not ever. Carson, please. I'm begging you. I've lost everything. My job, my home, my daughter. Don't take away the chance to make this right." Carson's grip tightened on the phone. Part of him wanted to hang up, to let her drown in the consequences of her choices. But another part, the part that had loved her once, that had built a family with her, couldn't quite let go. "You want to make it right?" he said quietly. "Then testify against Conrad. Tell the truth about what you saw. The violence, the control, the warning signs you ignored. Help put him away for as long as possible." "I will. I'll do whatever it takes. And stay away from Lily. She doesn't need your guilt or your apologies. She needs to heal. Please don't keep her from me forever. She's my daughter too. She was your daughter when you left her with a man who beat you. She was your daughter when you ignored her fear because it was easier than being alone. You gave up that title when you chose Conrad over her. Carson ended the call and sat in the darkness of his home office, listening to Lily sleep upstairs. The rage was still there, but it was colder now. More focused. Brittany would testify. She'd helped destroy Conrad in court. But that wasn't enough. Carson wanted more. On the 28th day, everything accelerated. Gil Caldwell cut ties with Conrad. The decision came via letter, delivered by courier. Due to ongoing legal complications and federal investigation, we are terminating your employment effective immediately. Your final paycheck will be processed according to state law. Conrad lost his income, his health insurance, and his most powerful ally in a single stroke. Without Gil's support, paying Zachary Dunn became impossible. Without Dunn's expensive legal expertise, Conrad was left with a public defender. The ankle monitor tracking showed Conrad at home for 3 straight days, barely moving. Then he went to the courthouse for a meeting with his new lawyer, a young public defender named Noel Carson, who'd graduated law school 2 years ago and was already drowning in cases. Rico's contact in the defender's office reported that the meeting lasted 20 minutes. Conrad wanted an aggressive defense. Noel explained that the evidence was overwhelming, that the best option was a plea deal. Conrad refused. He wanted a trial, wanted to prove his innocence, wanted to make Lily look like a liar. That night, Brittany called Carson again. Conrad's lawyer contacted me. They want me to testify that Lily is manipulative, that she lied before about things, that she was difficult to manage. They want me to help him. What did you say? I said no. I told them I'd testify for the prosecution. But Carson, he's going to come after me. He's going to try to destroy me in court, claim I knew everything, maybe even that it was my idea. Let him try. You don't understand. He has texts, messages where I complained about Lily acting out, where I said I didn't know how to handle her. He'll twist them, make it seem like I wanted her punished. Carson felt something cold settle in his stomach. Did you? No. I was frustrated, overwhelmed. Single parent, traveling constantly, trying to keep everything together. But I never wanted her hurt. Never. Then tell the truth in court. Accept whatever consequences come with it. And you? Will you ever forgive me? Carson looked at the photo of Lily on his desk. I don't know. But that's not what matters right now. What matters is making sure Conrad never hurts anyone again. After the call, Carson added this new information to his wall. Conrad was desperate now, isolated, grasping for anything that might save him. That made him dangerous, but also made him predictable. Carson called Detective Ramsey. I heard Conrad lost his lawyer and his job. Ramsey sighed. Yeah, honestly, it's not great. Desperate defendants sometimes do stupid things. We flagged him as high risk, increased monitoring. But with that ankle monitor, there's only so much he can do. What if he violates the terms of his bail? Then he goes back to jail until trial. What? Just thinking out loud. Carson ended the call and made another one. To Austin Ewing at the Brass Monkey. Austin, it's Carson. I need a favor. Name it. Conrad's been cut off from his support network. He's going to come to your bar Friday night. He always does when he's stressed. I need you to do something for me. What kind of something? Call him out. Publicly. Tell him he's not welcome anymore. That you know what he did, and you don't serve child abusers. You want me to provoke him. I want to see what he does when he's pushed. If he reacts violently, breaks the terms of his bail, he goes back to jail. If he doesn't, I still want him to feel what it's like to be rejected. Isolated. Scared. Austin was quiet for a moment. This is dangerous, Carson. I know, but Conrad thinks he's untouchable. I want him to know he's not. All right, I'll do it. But I'm calling it in to the cops first, having them nearby, just in case. Friday night, Carson watched from his truck parked across the street from the Brass Monkey. He'd arranged for Martha to stay with Lily, told her he had business to handle. Martha hadn't asked questions. She trusted him, understood that some things fathers had to do. At 11:20, Conrad arrived. He was wearing his leather jacket, walking with that same false confidence. But Carson could see the cracks now. The way he held his shoulders too tight. The way he scanned the parking lot before entering, looking for threats. Carson waited. Inside the bar, Austin would be watching, waiting for the right moment. At 11:45, Conrad was ejected from the brass monkey. Not by force. Austin was smarter than that, but by words. Carson couldn't hear them from across the street, but he saw Conrad's reaction. The shock, the anger, the humiliation as other patrons turned to stare. Conrad stood outside the bar for a full minute, hands clenched, chest heaving. Then he went to his car, the leased BMW he was struggling to afford, and sat there. Just sat, staring at nothing. Carson waited to see if he'd do something stupid, violate his bail, give the cops a reason to arrest him. But Conrad didn't. He drove home, probably under the limit, probably careful. Because even now, even desperate and alone, he was calculating, thinking ahead, trying to survive. That was fine. Carson was patient. The trial was scheduled for January 12th, 6 weeks away. Until then, Carson would dismantle every support structure Conrad had left, would make him feel the weight of isolation, would show him that being trapped wasn't just physical. And on the day of the trial, Carson would be there in the front row, watching Conrad face the consequences of his actions. But first, there was one more move to make. One more person who needed to understand what they'd enabled. Gil Caldwell. Carson found Gil Caldwell at the Rivers Casino on a Saturday night, sitting at a high-stakes poker table with a stack of chips and a glass of scotch. Gil looked every inch the successful businessman. Tailored suit, expensive watch, easy smile. The kind of man who'd built wealth on other people's suffering and never lost a night's sleep over it. Rico had provided the details. Gil came to the casino twice a month, always played poker, usually won. He had tells, everyone did, but he was disciplined enough to minimize them. Carson didn't care about winning. He cared about getting close. He bought in for $5,000, the last of his savings, and took a seat at Gil's table. There were 4 other players, all regulars, all men who treated gambling like a second job. They nodded at Carson, sized him up, dismissed him as fresh money. Evening, Gil said, smile warm and meaningless. First time at the Rivers. First time playing serious poker, Carson replied. Usually just friendly games. Well, we'll try to be gentle. The table laughed. They played. Carson was competent. He'd learned poker in the Marines, refined it on the rig during long nights offshore. But he wasn't here to win. He played loose, lost 3 hands in a row, built the image of an amateur with money to burn. After an hour, during a break, Gil stood to stretch and Carson followed him to the bar. Buy you a drink? Carson offered. Gil looked surprised, but pleased. Sure. Scotch neat. Carson ordered 2. They stood at the bar, watching the casino floor. Slot machines chimed. Dealers shuffled cards. People won and lost small fortunes with every roll of the dice. Hell of a place, Carson said. You come here often? Couple times a month. Helps me unwind. You. First time. Friend recommended it. You play well for a beginner. Just need to tighten up your betting. Appreciate the advice. Carson sipped his scotch. I'm actually trying to get back into the swing of things. Been working offshore for years. Just moved back permanently. Oil rig. Yeah, 15 years. But family situation changed. Needed to be home. Gil nodded sympathetically. Family's important. I've built my business so I can have flexibility, spend time with my kids. Work-life balance, you know. Carson's jaw tightened. Yeah, must be nice to have that control. It is. What line of work are you looking at now? Not sure yet. Maybe something in industrial inspection or construction. Got a background in demolitions and structural analysis. Demolitions? Gil's interest sharpened. That's specialized work. It is. Taught me patience. How to identify weak points in a structure. How to bring something down with precision. Gil didn't catch the double meaning. Well, if you're looking for work, I might be able to help. Always need people with technical skills. Carson set down his glass carefully. Actually, I know who you are, Mr. Caldwell. Gil. Quick Cash Solutions. Gil's smile faltered slightly. Well, I hope you haven't had any bad experiences with my company. No, but my ex-wife did. She took out a loan from you about a year ago. $30,000. I don't personally handle loan applications, but I'm sorry if there were any issues. No issues with the loan. Issues with the man who gave it to her. Conrad Jacobs. Gil's expression went carefully neutral. I see. You know what happened? I know you posted $750,000 to bail out a man who tortured my 7-year-old daughter. The bar suddenly felt very quiet despite the ambient noise. Gil looked at Carson, really looked at him for the first time, seeing past the flannel shirt and the easy demeanor to the rage underneath. Mr. Sanchez, I understand you're angry. You don't understand anything. You enabled a predator, gave him legitimacy, resources, protection. And when he finally went too far, you tried to bail him out. Conrad worked for me for 8 years. I believed in second chances and due process. I didn't know the extent of what he'd done until after I posted bail. Bullshit. You knew exactly who he was. You knew about the domestic violence calls, the complaints from customers, the pattern of intimidation. You just didn't care because he made you money. Gil's jaw tightened. I'm not going to stand here and be accused. You're being investigated by the CFPB. I made sure of that. I compiled evidence of every illegal collection method Conrad used on your behalf. Every threat, every harassment, every line he crossed. And I sent it all to the federal government. That's slander. Libel. I could sue you for. Go ahead. Sue me. See what else comes out in discovery. But here's what's going to happen, Gil. You're going to cooperate with the investigation. You're going to provide documentation of Conrad's actions. You're going to show the court exactly who you hired and what you enabled. And maybe, if you're lucky, you'll get through this with your business intact. Gil leaning close, voice dropping. You're threatening me. In a public place. That's foolish. I'm not threatening you. I'm promising you. If you try to help Conrad in any way, if you pay for his defense, if you testify on his behalf, if you so much as send him a supportive text message, I will dedicate the rest of my life to destroying everything you've built. I know how to identify weak points, Gil. I know how to bring things down. And your empire is built on sand. Carson finished his scotch, set the empty glass on the bar, and walked away. He cashed out his remaining chips, $2, $400, less than he'd started with, and headed to the parking lot. His phone buzzed. Text from Rico. Just got word. Gil Caldwell's lawyers contacted the DA's office. They're offering to cooperate with the prosecution of Conrad Jacobs in exchange for consideration in the CFPB investigation. Carson smiled for the first time in weeks. Phase 3 complete. The weeks before the trial passed, like a slow-motion avalanche. Carson watched from the sidelines as Conrad's world collapsed piece by piece. Each move calculated, each pressure point exploited. Brittany formally agreed to testify for the prosecution. The DA, a woman named Caroline Weber, met with her 3 times, building a case that went beyond just the storage unit. Brittany described Conrad's escalating violence, his control, the warning signs she'd ignored. She provided text messages where Conrad had complained about Lily being difficult and needing real discipline. She admitted, tearfully, that she'd seen him grab Lily's arm hard enough to leave marks, but had convinced herself it wasn't that bad. Conrad's new lawyer, Noelle Carson, tried to fight back but was overwhelmed. She filed motions to suppress evidence, to exclude testimony, to paint Lily as unreliable. Each motion was denied. The judge, Marion Foster, had seen too many cases like this, heard too many excuses. She wasn't interested in technicalities. Conrad himself became increasingly erratic. The ankle monitor tracking showed him pacing his apartment for hours, making late-night trips to convenience stores, sitting in his car in empty parking lots. He was unraveling, and Carson made sure he knew he was being watched. He'd arranged for small things. A flyer under Conrad's windshield wiper about child safety. A news article about his case taped to his apartment door. Always anonymous, always untraceable. Just enough to remind Conrad that the walls were closing in. Dr. Sheena Maxwell reported that Lily was making progress in therapy. The nightmares were less frequent. She'd started drawing again, something she'd loved before the storage unit. Her pictures were dark, lots of black and gray, closed doors, small figures in big spaces, but she was expressing herself, processing trauma. She talks about you constantly, Sheena told Carson during one of their parent sessions. About how you came to get her, how you promised to stay. She's rebuilding trust, but it's fragile. The trial is going to be difficult. She'll have to testify, face Conrad again. Are you prepared for that? I'll be with her every step. She can't have you in the room during testimony. Court rules. Then I'll be right outside. She'll know I'm there. On December 20th, 1 month after Lily came home, Carson received a call from Detective Ramsey. We've got a problem. Conrad's bail was revoked. Carson sat up straighter. What happened? He violated the terms, cut off his ankle monitor, and ran. We found the monitor in a dumpster behind his apartment complex. He's been missing for 12 hours. Ice flooded Carson's veins. Where would he go? No idea. We've got patrol units watching his known associates, checking hotels, monitoring his credit cards. But Carson, you need to take precautions. Lock your doors. Keep Lily close. He might come for us. It's a possibility. He's desperate, facing serious prison time. Some people run. Some people lash out. We don't know which one Conrad is. Carson thanked the detective and immediately called Martha. Take Lily to your house. Don't let her out of your sight. If anyone approaches, you call 911. What's going on? Conrad escaped. He's out there somewhere. Martha's voice went hard. He comes near this house. I've got a shotgun with his name on it. Just keep Lily safe. I'll handle the rest. Carson locked the house, checked every window, every door. Then he went to the garage and opened a locked cabinet he'd installed weeks ago. Inside was a Glock 19, legally purchased and registered, along with 2 spare magazines. He'd never expected to need it, had hoped the system would work, that Conrad would stay in jail until trial. But hope was for people who trusted institutions. Carson trusted preparation. He loaded the Glock, chambered around, and sat in the living room with the lights off, waiting. His phone was on the coffee table, Rico's number on speed dial, police on standby. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. At 2 a.m., Carson heard something. A car engine, idling on the street. He moved to the window, careful to stay in shadow. Conrad's BMW was parked 3 houses down, lights off. Carson could see a figure in the driver's seat, just sitting there, watching. Carson's phone buzzed. Text from Rico. Monitoring company says Conrad's phone just pinged off a tower near Pinewood Drive. He's in your neighborhood. Carson texted back. I know. I can see him. Police. On standby. But if he makes a move, I handle it. Be careful, brother. Carson watched Conrad watch his house. Minutes stretched like hours. Finally, Conrad's car started moving. It drove past slowly, Conrad staring at the dark windows, probably trying to decide if anyone was home. He didn't stop, didn't get out, just drove past and disappeared around the corner. Carson called 911, gave them Conrad's location and direction of travel. Within 10 minutes, police units flooded the area. They found Conrad's BMW abandoned in a grocery store parking lot 2 miles away. No sign of Conrad himself. The manhunt intensified. Local news ran Conrad's photo with a dangerous fugitive warning. Patrol cars cruised Pinewood Drive every hour. Carson stayed home, kept Lily with Martha, and waited. 3 days later, they found Conrad. He'd broken into a vacant house in the Riverside district, probably planning to hide there until he could figure out his next move. A neighbor had reported suspicious activity, and when police arrived, Conrad had surrendered without resistance. He was taken back to county jail, this time without possibility of bail. His trial date was moved up. Judge Foster wanted him dealt with before he could cause more damage. Carson visited the courthouse to watch Conrad's rearraignment. The man who walked into the courtroom was a shadow of his former self. No leather jacket, no swagger. Just orange scrubs and handcuffs and defeat in his eyes. Their eyes met across the courtroom. Conrad held his gaze for a moment, and Carson saw the recognition there. Not a face. They'd only met briefly at the Brass Monkey, but of a force. Conrad knew, somehow, that Carson had orchestrated this. That the collapsing walls, the lost allies, the inescapable pressure, all of it traced back to the man whose daughter he'd tortured. And Carson made sure his expression conveyed one simple message. This is just the beginning. January 12th arrived with freezing rain and gray skies. Carson drove to the courthouse with Lily in the back seat, holding the stuffed rabbit Dr. Sheena had given her for comfort. She'd been quiet all morning, picking at her breakfast, avoiding eye contact. "You don't have to do this," Carson said gently. "If it's too hard, I'll tell the judge. We'll find another way." "I want to," Lily said quietly. "I want to tell what happened, so he can't hurt anyone else." "You're so brave, baby. Braver than I ever was at your age. You came to get me. That's brave." Carson's throat tightened. "I'll always come for you." Inside the courthouse, Assistant DA Caroline Weber met them in a private conference room. She was in her early 40s, sharp-eyed and professional, with a reputation for advocating fiercely for victims. "Lily, we're going to go over your testimony one more time. I'll ask you questions just like we practiced. Mr. Dunn, Conrad's lawyer, Ms. Carson, will ask questions too. Some of them might make you uncomfortable. But remember, you just have to tell the truth. Can you do that?" Lily nodded. They practiced for 30 minutes. Then it was time. The courtroom filled with people, jurors, reporters, observers. Brittany sat in the back row, looking small and broken. Martha was there too, along with Rico and Detective Ramsey. All of them here to support Lily, to witness Conrad's reckoning. Conrad entered in shackles, flanked by bailiffs. He'd lost weight in jail, his face gaunt, his eyes hollow. But when he looked at Lily, Carson saw that same arrogance flash across his face. Like he still believed he could win. Like he still thought he was smarter than everyone else. Judge Foster called the court to order. "We're here for the trial of Conrad Michael Jacobs, charged with aggravated child endangerment, child abuse, false imprisonment, and assault. Ms. Weber, call your first witness." The state calls Lily Marie Sanchez. Carson squeezed his daughter's hand one more time, then watched her walk to the witness stand. She looked so small up there, dwarfed by the chair, the microphone, the weight of what she had to do. Caroline Weber approached gently. "Lily, can you tell the jury what happened on October 18th? Lily's voice was quiet but steady. "Conrad said I was being bad. I wasn't. I just asked if I could call my daddy. He got really mad. He grabbed my arm and put me in his car. He drove for a long time. Then we stopped at a building with lots of metal doors. He opened one and pushed me inside. It was dark and empty and smelled bad. He said I needed to learn to appreciate what I had. Then he closed the door and I heard a lock. What happened after that? I tried to open the door, but I couldn't. I screamed for help, but nobody came. There was a bottle of water and some crackers in the corner. Conrad said it would teach me not to complain. He said Daddy didn't want me anyway. That's why he was gone." Carson's hands clenched so hard his knuckles cracked. Rico put a hand on his shoulder, steadying him. "How long were you in there, Lily?" "A long time. The water ran out. The crackers were gone. I tried to save them, but I was so hungry. It was so dark. I thought nobody would find me. I thought I was going to die there." "Did Conrad come back?" "Once. After maybe a week? I don't know. Time felt weird. He opened the door and threw in another water bottle and a granola bar. He said if I told anyone, he'd put me somewhere worse. Then he left again." The courtroom was silent except for someone crying softly in the back. Brittany, probably, drowning in the consequences of her choices. Caroline asked more questions, building the timeline, establishing the facts. Lily answered each one clearly, precisely, like Dr. Sheena had taught her. When it was time for cross-examination, Noelle Carson stood reluctantly. "Lily, I'm sorry you went through that," she began. "I just had a few questions. Before Conrad put you in the storage unit, had you been misbehaving at home?" "Objection," Caroline Weber said sharply. "Relevance." "Sustained," Judge Foster said. "Ms. Carson, this child behavior does not justify what happened to her." "Your Honor, I'm trying to establish context. Then establish it without victim blaming." "Next question." Noelle tried a few more angles, but her heart wasn't in it. She knew the case was unwinnable, that her client was guilty, that the best she could do was minimize the damage. After 10 minutes, she sat down. The prosecution called more witnesses. Martha McCarthy, who described finding Lily unresponsive in the hospital. Dr. Angela Curtis, who detailed the medical evidence of starvation and dehydration. Detective Ramsey, who walked through the investigation. Brittany, who tearfully admitted she'd seen warning signs and ignored them. Then, surprisingly, Sandra O'Donnell took the stand. Caroline Weber had managed to get her testimony admitted as pattern evidence, showing Conrad's history of violence. Sandra described her relationship with Conrad, the escalating abuse, the fear that kept her silent. Finally, on the third day of trial, it was Conrad's turn. Noel Carson advised him not to testify, told him it would only make things worse, but Conrad insisted. He wanted his chance to speak, to explain, to defend himself. He took the stand in his jail scrubs, trying to project confidence, but only achieving desperation. "Mr. Jacobs," his lawyer began, "tell the jury in your own words what happened." "I made a mistake," Conrad said. "I was trying to discipline Lily because Brittany asked me to. She said Lily was out of control, that she needed structure. I thought a brief timeout in a climate-controlled space would teach her responsibility. I didn't mean for it to last so long. I got caught up with work, with other obligations. It was an error in judgment, not malicious intent." "Did you intend to harm Lily?" "Absolutely not. I cared about her. I was trying to help her mother." Caroline Weber stood for cross-examination, and Carson saw the killer instinct in her eyes. "Mr. Jacobs, you claim this was a brief timeout. How brief?" "I thought it would be a few hours, but it lasted 21 days. I lost track of time." "You lost track of time while a 7-year-old child was locked in a storage unit without adequate food or water?" "I was dealing with a lot." "Yes, we heard about what you were dealing with. You went to work. You went to the gym. You went to the Brass Monkey to drink and play pool. You were busy with your life while Lily was starving in the dark. I checked on her. Once. According to Lily's testimony, you brought her 1 bottle of water and a granola bar after approximately a week. Is it your idea of adequate care?" Conrad's composure cracked. "She was fine. She was exaggerating. Kids do that. Kids exaggerate severe dehydration. Kids exaggerate nearly dying. She wasn't nearly dying." Dr. Curtis testified that another 3 days without intervention would likely have been fatal. "Do you dispute her medical expertise?" "I know, but..." "Mr. Jacobs, you have a history of violence. 2 domestic disturbance calls from previous partners. Complaints from customers about your aggressive collection tactics. You're a man who uses fear and intimidation to control people. Isn't that what you did to Lily?" "No. You locked a child in a box because she asked to call her father. You wanted to break her spirit, make her compliant, eliminate any connection to Carson Sanchez. Isn't that the truth?" "That's not. I didn't." "Did you tell Lily that her father didn't want her?" Conrad's mouth opened and closed. "I may have said something like that, but..." "Yes or no, Mr. Jacobs? Did you tell a scared, starving 7-year-old girl that her father had abandoned her?" "Yes." The courtroom erupted. Judge Foster banged her gavel, calling for order. But the damage was done. Conrad had admitted to psychological torture on top of physical abuse. He'd shown the jury exactly who he was. The trial concluded 2 days later. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. A formality, really. Everyone in that courtroom knew the verdict before they left the room. Guilty on all counts. Conrad's face went white as the foreman read the verdict. Guilty of aggravated child endangerment. Guilty of child abuse. Guilty of false imprisonment. Guilty of assault. Judge Foster set sentencing for 2 weeks later, but gave a preview. "Mr. Jacobs, you are a danger to society. You tortured a child because you could, because she was vulnerable, because you wanted to demonstrate power. I will ensure you never have that opportunity again." Carson sat in the front row, holding Lily close. She buried her face in his shoulder, crying with relief and exhaustion. It was over. Conrad had been held accountable. Justice, however imperfect, had been served. But Carson wasn't done yet. The sentencing hearing on January 28th was brief. Judge Foster sentenced Conrad to 25 years in state prison with no possibility of parole for 15 years. When he walked out of that courtroom, if he lived that long, Lily would be 22 years old, past his reach, beyond his harm. Conrad was led away in chains, and Carson felt something in his chest finally loosen. Not forgiveness, not peace, but closure. Lily was safe. Conrad was caged. The immediate threat was neutralized. After the sentencing, Carson took Lily to Dr. Sheena's office for a session. "How do you feel?" the therapist asked gently. "Tired," Lily said, "but better. He can't hurt me anymore." "That's right. You're safe now. And you were so brave telling your story. Daddy was there. He promised he'd always come for me." Dr. Sheena smiled, and he kept that promise. That afternoon, Carson and Lily went home to Pinewood Drive. Martha had prepared dinner, a roast with potatoes, Lily's favorite. They ate together, the three of them, talking about simple things. School projects, spring gardening plans, the future. Later, after Lily went to bed, Carson sat on the porch with a beer, watching the quiet street. His phone buzzed. Text from Rico. "Quick Cash Solutions filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. CFPB investigation findings were released. Gil Caldwell is facing federal charges." Company's done. Carson allowed himself a small smile. The structure had collapsed, just as he'd planned. Conrad in prison. Gil facing prosecution. Brittany stripped of her job and credibility. Every person who'd enabled the harm to his daughter had paid a price. Another text, this one from Detective Ramsey. "Heard you stayed in town. Found employment." Carson had, actually, a local construction company specializing in demolition work. The owner, Duncan Shepard, his old commander from the rig, had relocated to the area and offered Carson a position. Same skills, different environment. And most importantly, no more 6-week shifts offshore. Carson would be home every night. "Yeah," Carson texted back. "Sticking around. Lily needs stability." "Good man. We should grab a drink sometime." "I'd like that." Carson finished his beer and went inside. He checked on Lily, still sleeping peacefully, no nightmares tonight, and then went to his home office. The wall he'd covered with plans and photos, and evidence was still there, a record of everything he'd done. Tomorrow, he'd take it down, box it up, put it away. Not because he regretted it, but because it was finished. Conrad was where he belonged. The people who'd enabled him had faced consequences. And most importantly, Lily was healing. Carson had learned something in those weeks of planning and execution. Justice wasn't always about courts and laws. Sometimes it was about patience, about understanding your enemy's weaknesses and applying pressure precisely where it would cause maximum impact, about being smarter, more disciplined, more ruthless than the people who'd hurt your family. He'd spent 15 years learning how to demolish structures safely and effectively. He'd applied those same principles to Conrad's life, and it had worked. Not because Carson was stronger or tougher, but because he was methodical. Because he'd refused to let rage cloud his judgment. Because he'd waited for the right moment and struck when it would hurt most. And now, finally, he could focus on what really mattered, being a father. Rebuilding trust. Creating a home where Lily felt safe, loved, wanted. Where she'd never again question whether he'd come for her. Carson turned off the lights and climbed the stairs. Tomorrow was Sunday. He'd take Lily to the park, maybe get ice cream, spend the day doing normal father-daughter things. Building new memories to replace the dark ones. 3 weeks offshore, Conrad Jacobs had stolen from his daughter. But Carson had taken everything from him in return. Freedom, future, hope. It was a fair trade. And as Carson lay in bed, listening to the quiet house, he felt something he hadn't felt in months. Peace. The kind that comes from knowing you've done what needed to be done, from protecting what mattered most, from being the father your child needs you to be. Conrad Jacobs thought he'd won when he isolated Lily, when he made her believe her father had abandoned her, when he locked her in that darkness. But he'd been wrong, because Carson Sanchez had come home, and he'd brought hell with him. Justice, in the end, had been served, not just in the courtroom, but in the systematic destruction of everything Conrad had built. His career, his freedom, his reputation, his future, all of it reduced to rubble, demolished with the precision of a man who understood exactly where to strike. And now, Carson could finally rest. Not because the rage was gone. It would always be there, a low burn in his chest whenever he thought about those 21 days. But because he channeled it into something productive, something meaningful. He'd protected his daughter, and he'd made damn sure that everyone who'd heard her understood exactly what that meant. The oil rig was behind him now. The ocean, the isolation, all of it traded for this. a quiet house on Pinewood Drive, a daughter sleeping peacefully upstairs, a future where Lily would grow up knowing her father kept his promises. Carson Sanchez had been 300 miles offshore when the call came, but he'd made it home in time, and he made everyone pay who'd hurt his little girl. That was enough. That was justice. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.